Alright, so we're ready for day 2 with your watercolor. And on day 1 we had you tape out and mask out your 3 trees. You should have 1 thick tree, 2 thin trees. If you remember some of the requirements that we needed, that the tops of all your trees went off the top of your paper. The bottoms of your trees should be below this horizon line, and we should have a low, a middle, and a high in your ground. Now once you think every tree has branches and branches off of branches, you've taken your ID badge and rubbed everything in so it's all stuck on there nice and tight. Then you want to come up and show me your watercolor. Okay? And I'm going to tell you, yes, you're ready to start painting, or no, you're not, because your next step then is going to be painting the sky. The technique that we'll be using to paint the sky is called Wet-inWet, and we'll show you what that means here in just a second. But when you start to think about your sky, you need to start thinking about what colors you want to have in your sky. And so one way to think about it is, do you want your sky colors to be mainly warm or cool colored skies like this, blues, greens, and violets, or do you want it to be more warmer or hotter colored skies like reds, yellows, and oranges? So it'd be like this one's more of a hotter colored sky. Okay, so that's what's one way to start thinking about your watercolor. Okay, is do I want cool color skies mainly or warm colored skies? And then once you've kind of got an idea as far as, okay, I want cool colored skies or warm colored skies, we also need you to be thinking about your color wheel. So let's talk here just a minute about the color wheel. So when we think about the color wheel, you guys, let me zoom down on this here just a little bit so we can see a little bit better. When we think about the color wheel, we think of the 3 primary colors here. So if we think of the color wheel, we think of red, blue, and yellow. Those are the primary colors, okay? So we'll put a circle around those so we know those are the primary colors: red, blue, and yellow. And then if we were to mix 2 primary colors together, we get a secondary color. So red and blue make a violet. We'll put a square around that. Blue and yellow make a green. And yellow and red make an orange. Now, when I mix a primary color with a secondary color, I get what's called a tertiary color, or an intermediate hue. So if I were to mix red and violet together, I would get a reddish violet. Now, you always start with the primary color first in labeling this. So that means when I mix blue and violet together, this would be called a bluish violet. This would be called a bluish green. This would be called a yellowish green. This would be called a yellowish orange. This would be called a reddish orange. So there's our color wheel. Now, knowing the color wheel, not all colors get along together all the time. Opposites on the color wheel don't like each other. So what I'm talking about here is if I mix red plus green, Christmas colors, I would get a brown mucky mess. If I were to mix blue plus orange, I would get a brown mucky mess. If I were to mix yellow plus violet, I would get a brown mucky mess. So I want to stay away from mixing these colors together. Now that doesn't mean that those colors can't be together in a watercolor. It just means that they can't be touching each other at the same time in a watercolor. Okay? So, for example, if we had, let's say, a violet and a yellow, there's some colors here. As long as they're not touching each other, they're going to be okay. They're going to be okay as far as the mixing goes. If they're touching each other, then they're going to probably tend to kind of muck up into a brownish kind of mucky mess. So we got to be careful about that when we start to think about mixing and making your colors. Okay? So you want to have a plan. So I'll show you some examples here. Here's one that we mixed, and the process of this was we always start at the horizon line with your lightest color. So this was like a yellowish to a red to a blue. And this one was a yellow to a blue to a green. That's what this one was. This one, this hotter one, was yellow to orange to red. They're just those warm colors. And this one was black to green to yellow. Did it backwards. And this one here is an interesting one too. This was yellow to red to black. And we've already seen this one, and this one was like a light blue to a black in the sky. Okay, so you need to be thinking about your color combination that you want in your sky. Okay, so once you got it figured out kind of what you want to do for your sky, then at your table you're going to notice we do have some painting supplies for you. So we'll zoom up here just a tad to show you some of these. And so you're going to have a little cup like this, and you're going to have to put water in this cup. This cup doesn't require very much water at all, but you do need to put water in the cup. You will also have a big brush. Okay, this big brush is the one that you're going to be using today. Eventually, you will get a small detail brush as well, and that may be at your table today too. It just kind of depends on where we're at in our class, but those are the two brushes that you'll need. And then you also will have a watercolor tray. This watercolor tray looks like this, and you've got brown, like a violet, a blue, a green, yellow, orange, red, and a black. And those are probably all the colors you really need to make your watercolor. And the only thing you're going to need is about 2 or 3 paper towels. Okay, especially today when we do this assignment that's wet and wet, you're going to need 2 or 3 paper towels. Okay, so to do this process of wet and wet, we're going to take our watercolor here, and I'm going to try to set my water here so you can kind of see it. There we go. I'm going to try to zoom in just a little bit more so you can get a little bit better view here. There we go. Now we're going to take our big brush, and actually I'm going to switch this over this way since I'm right-handed. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take the water with our brush, and we're just going to soak the entire sky. Just like this. Just get it all wet. Just like this. And in this case, you can't over wet it. You just don't want to go below your ground. You're going to go right over your taped trees. That's why we wanted them all pressed in there nice and hard. And we're just going to get this sky all wet. So the idea of wet and wet is our paint, our paper is wet, our brush is wet, obviously, and then our paints are wet. So we've got our wet paint here, and we're going to start with our lightest color. So my lightest color that I'm going to do here is going to be yellow. So I'm going to load up with yellow here in my brush, and I always kind of address my brush at an angle like this. I would never set this on my regular watercolor like I'm doing right now for you guys. I would have this sitting next to your table. But this is my lightest color first, and your brush strokes, guys, always go left to right like this, just left to right like this. Then I'm going to go to my next color. My next color, I think I'm going to go with a red. And we'll let those colors kind of mix. But again, it's just left to right. You don't overwork your paper. Then we're going to go with this kind of purpley color. And really, 3 to 4 colors here is probably good. Now purple and yellow we don't want to mix because that's going to make that brown mucky mess. And yellow and orange, or blue and orange, we don't want to mix, but we're going to throw some blue in here. I'll throw some blue over here. And then kind of make it look a little weird or darker. I might throw some black up here. Okay. Now I can let this dry just like this, or I can also do another technique that's called running. And running is where you would take your watercolor over to the garbage here, and what you're going to do is you're going to tip it up and let some of this color run off the top of your watercolor like this. And you let it run into the garbage. I got it running into some paper towels. Try to catch some with a paper towel here, and then you just stop when you think you're done, and you let it sit. Now this step is one you can do, but you don't have to do. Okay. Now the other can do step for this is up front I'm going to have some salt. Okay, this is some salt, and if you noticed in a couple of these, the sky looked kind of funky like this, and it may look like it's snowing, and that's from salt. So what you do is you just take a pinch of salt, and we're going to sprinkle with our fingers back and forth some salt in the sky, and we let it dry just like that. Okay, and that is your step today for wet and wet and painting your sky. Good luck.